service.
Oh, okay.
You want one?
I got one. That's a new thing, handing out bulletins.
Yeah.
Makes us like a big church. Welcome to First Universalist Church of New Madison on this ending of summer day. Actually, it was when it gets in the 60s at night, it's not too hot and stuffy in here, so it's supposed to get hot today, but we're doing pretty good so far. So, and I was going to, but I forgot. I work the Democratic tent every day. Tent for the Darke County Democrats, sat there and argued with the Republicans for a couple hours every day. So we had part of the things we were handing out with Nan fans. And instead of having funeral home fans here, they're a little fan on a stick for Nan Whaley. Oh, that I totally forgot to bring them. So I'll see if there's any left over at the next meeting. If there are, I'll bring them in. Do we have any announcements? Okay, Labor Day, Darke will be here, and evidently at El Dorado, they do not have church on the Labor Day Sunday. I'm not sure exactly what that tradition, where it came from. So he's invited any of them who want to go to church to come here. So we'll see if we get a reciprocal attendance then. This is the end. Yes.
Hey, I think this is for I don't know, an announcement or not. But could I have 5 minutes of everybody's time after church, and so I'm doing something for the people who.
Yes.
I just need 5 minutes.
Lou's he's been contacting people all over the place, and they've been contacting you. So we'll check on the progress. We as a church want to join with other churches or other volunteer organizations to help the people of Ukraine. And that's what we're investigating to see what the most appropriate and the easiest way to do that is, and the most efficient way to do that. Okay, the fair is ending today. Pretty much if you go today, there will be nothing left.
It ended last night.
Yeah, technically it ended last night, but there's still being taken.
Tear down and move out.
Tear down and move out today, which is always fun. So
it's still busy there. When I go to
yeah, it's still busy, and there's still food trailers are still selling food if you're hungry and want fair food. I was personally amazed at you hear about inflation and you see it in the grocery store, eggs are $1.99 a dozen instead of like 56 cents like they were last year on sale. But when giant Texas tenderloins went to $12 for a tenderloin, I draw the line at that. So I go to Eikenberry's and buy my bread and tenderloins and cook them at home. So they lost me on that. But there's still some bargains up there. There was a place selling Hawaiian soft serve ice cream with pineapple in it for $3 for a big cone. That's pretty reasonable. So I had a couple of those. All right, our prelude, Give Me Jesus. This is an African American spiritual. some nimble finger work. So thanks to Roberta and Lloyd both for the music, which is actually what makes church church. Church without music would be pretty lame. We talked about the fair earlier, and that's what our concentration is going to be on. I did a little bit of investigating into the fair history. The Darke County Fair started in 1853, and I'll kind of read you the report. I think it was done in the sesquicentennial, which I can't even tell you when that was, in the early 2000s, the 150th anniversary. The person who wrote that is a pretty good writer, so I'm going to read some of that verbatim because I really enjoyed, I'm assuming it was a her, I was a reporter for some newspaper, I'm thinking. But it's pretty interesting, it's pretty lengthy, so we're going to cut a lot of it out. I'll try and get you the interesting parts of it. And I'm just trying to look, was there a fair in 2020 or 2021 with
Partial
with the
fair.
virus?
You had the 4-H animals.
At the 4-H,
and
because
such.
I didn't go, and
They didn't have rides. Concessionaires were invited in on the final Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the fair.
because I thought it was pretty limited, because
Yeah.
we were real scared and really cautious of being in crowds, so we didn't even attempt to go for that. But the fair was canceled for 3 other times. Anybody know when that would be?
1950 polio.
Exactly, 49 and 50 was canceled for 2 years
Okay.
because of the polio epidemic, and I'll give you some facts on that, but there were 22 or 23 cases in Darke County in that 1 and 2 years of young kids with polio. Didn't say how many died and how many were paralyzed, but that was a pretty frightening thing, and I'm sure people were wearing their masks, and they were banning church services, they were banning everything at that time. So we'll get to that. All right, a chalice lighting, A Community of Faith by Judith L. Quarles. Lighting a chalice at this hour in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries. Many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light ours today, let us remember that we are part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth. Our opening hymn is 83, Winds Be Still. ideas and interesting thoughts. Our first slide is my favorite of any fair, and when I started looking for these, remember I showed you before the kid sleeping with his animal. This is from, I think, in the 50s, but there are all kinds of these. This is something it's pretty common for kids and their 4-H calves. And like I said, if it's a beef calf, you're saying goodbye. If it's a dairy heifer, you'll see that one for another 20 years. Okay. Affirmation. The church has left the building, by Margaret Weiss. The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not only a steeple above the tree-lined streets and cars, rather it is a people proclaiming to the world that we are here for the work of healing and justice. The church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar, but rather person linked with person, linked with person. All ages and genders and abilities, a community built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. The church is not just a set of doors open on Sunday morning, but the commitment day after day, moment after moment, of our hearts creaking open the doors of welcome to the possibility of new experience and radical welcome. The church is not simply a building, a steeple, a pew. The church is the gathering together of all the peoples and experiences and fear and love and hope in our resilient hearts. Gathering however we can to say to the world, welcome, come in, lay down your heartache, pick up hope and love. For the church is us, each and every one of us together. A beacon of hope to this world that so sorely needs it. The children's story is Horse Progress Days in Montgomery, Indiana, staying with our fair theme. And you might wonder where Montgomery, Indiana is. If you look at the population at Horse Progress Days, it will give you an idea. where Montgomery, Indiana is. Yeah. There is a pretty sizable Amish population there. And naturally, the Amish are more interested in horse progress than anyone else. But if you noticed, the Amish can do anything with horses that you can do with a tractor. They have what they call pony motors that run hay balers, that run the guy was spraying, which is kind of discouraging to see, spraying, because those fumes he's breathing it and the horse is breathing it. But they can do anything that a regular farmer can do, and they can pull it with horses. And pretty amazingly, there was an 8-horse hitch in there. That's 8 horses hooked together. That's kind of a combination and a complicated thing to do when you start hitching all those up one after another, and then controlling them when you get them started out. The other thing is they enjoy, the Amish have a simple life, and I think I've told you this before, but that's where a lot of retired racehorses go, is to Amish families for the Sunday buggy ride to church, because they can beat any other horse on the block. Their kids race like anybody else races, and the kid with the fastest horse has bragging rights for all of that. So, Darke County Fair. This poster is from 1919.
1919.
I'm sorry, 1919, yes. It still has the World War I doughboy on there. And it has a picture of the track with the horses, and you can see the grandstand has been changed since then, but it's the same basic thing. But instead of having a storm fence, a cyclone fence all the way around the track, they just had a railing and everybody was allowed to stand there. If you were at the fair, they had lots of interesting exhibits, motorcycle races, truck pulls, things that were, as I sat there in the afternoon in that tent, the black diesel smoke rolling over the fairgrounds. It was so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. But the interesting thing I noticed was during anything that people had to pay to get into the grandstands, they strung canvas along that cyclone fence, clear around from both sides of the grandstand as far as you could go, so if you didn't pay, you couldn't see it. So that was kind of interesting. Okay. Tractor pulls, they start out when they're young in Darke County, and then they don't quit when you get really old. You end up with your tractor from 1952, still pulling. And, of course, horse racing, harness racing has been big ever since all the way along. And also, I went last night, it was the horse pulls, and I had to try to get some film in, but I didn't get it into here. Last night, the winner, there was 2 Belgians. Actually, they were dappled Belgians, which are pretty interesting. I've never seen those before. But the 2 horses together weighed about 46 to 4,800 pounds. They pulled 12,500 pounds. 18 feet. They couldn't make the whole 22-foot completion of the pull, but they were the winning team because they pulled it the farthest. Pretty incredible. That was these 2 horses here. And then a little bit on the history of Greenville. If you went to, and I had to throw this in, I may have shown you this before. If you went to the museum that we went to a couple of weeks ago, this is what Greenville looked like in the early 20s. They had suburbans or interurbans tracks, but Main Street is still dirt. If you get a chance to go to the museum, Darke's Museum, they've got some fantastic exhibits there. Take a time and go do that. Okay, joys and concerns. We want to remember Ukraine, as always, with their sunflowers. Things are getting really dicey. The Ukrainians are starting to use sabotage back in Crimea, striking deep into Russian-held territory, and the Russians are retaliating by holding hostage the largest nuclear plant in Europe. I think there's like 4 or 5 nuclear generators there. They're cutting off the power, which means if there's no power to run the pumps to keep the nuclear fuel clean, that will cause a meltdown, which will spread radioactivity all over Europe and all over the world. Really, the wind will carry it around the world. It escapes me. You would think people in charge of an entire nation and with billion-dollar economies would be smarter than this. So I don't know what is driving. I think it's the same mentality that drives people to walk around during an epidemic without wearing a mask and without getting vaccinated. It must be the same thing as going on. So, Ukraine, anyone else? Yes?
Let's remember in this world today, hungry children, malnutrition is still alive and well, even more so today. And whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's in Africa, Somalia, where all those countries so vulnerable to malnutrition, it is indeed rearing its ugly head. It's more than likely to continue to do so, particularly when it interfaces with what's going to be a disastrous competition for fossil fuels, particularly gas, natural gas liquefied, which we're going to see this winter because of Europe's demand as well as the rest of the world's demand. And so all those factors, yes, remember in your thoughts and prayers, but also in your contributions of actually monetary support as you receive those flowers in the mail and wherever else. You watch the footage on TV, and it's hard to render.
Yeah, the history of Afghanistan, if you've seen, there's been some updates, particularly on public TV, with the Taliban, women not allowed to study, not allowed to work, and that includes women doctors. They said 50% of the population is in danger of malnutrition, and a certain large percentage is in danger of actual starvation, and the government is not doing anything about it other than complain that their money is being held up in the international courts because of the activities, the illegal activities of the government. So, yeah, hunger will be sweeping the world. Climate change, we're having floods, drought simultaneously, which seems to be hard to believe. That's affecting the entire world, and yet we still have people with their heads in the sand saying there is no actual climate change. That's one of the arguments that the people from the Republican tent were giving us, that when I was telling them Antarctica was melting and the Arctic was melting, and his response was, well, it always melts in the summertime. No, it doesn't. But facts mean nothing in a case like that. Anything else?
I talked to Sharon Robbins at the fair this past week. Sharon is one of Jeanette Burns' daughters. Jeanette is in Brookdale Nursing Home in Greenville, has been since May. She's fallen several times, but luckily not hurt herself. She's wearing one of the alert buttons, but forgets to use it. Also having some memory problems and things. So she celebrated her 91st birthday recently. 91.
Jeanette Burns, 91.
Jeanette Burns, yeah.
And where is she again, Kenny?
Brookdale.
Brookdale and Greenville.
Greenville.
Brookdale.
Thank you.
Maybe we can send a card, and I still got on my list to visit anybody that I can. I'll put Janet on the list. Unfortunately, that's one of the lower priority items, which it shouldn't be, but it does get shut down as we go along, so we'll keep working on that. And anyone else that would like to visit, feel free to do that. I think Janet would appreciate that.
Where is she?
Brookdale.
And where is Brookdale?
That's out in the Zephyrs.
Okay, well, they changed names on these
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Brookdale. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and we want to remember Sierra, I think that's her name. The Richmond police officer is still alive. There was a nice article, I think it was in the Richmond paper. She married her partner, or her partner married her, even though she's basically on a respirator in a coma. Came to the hospital, had an actual ceremony at the hospital. That was pretty touching. So our hearts and minds are with Sierra and her recovery. Right, for those thoughts, prayers, fears, desires, things that you can't speak to anyone about, you can cast it into the eternity. And if you need help, please come to us. We are available. All right. 144 years of history. That was the date this was written. I think it was in the 2000s. And this was, I'm going to read some of this verbatim because I love the language. In the long tried and found true history of Darke County, there has never been, nor likely ever will be, an entity that has drawn the abiding attention of so many people, residents and non-residents alike. as that August Augmentation Fair Week. August Augmentation. Not even sure that's what augmentation means, but it fits in there nicely. It all began in 1853 when Franklin Pierce served as the 14th President of the United States and has lived, breathed, and prospered through the terms of no less than 28 heads of that state. The history of the Great Darke County Fair, and that is its name, the Great Darke County Fair, very soon to see its 142nd merry-go-round, is much too deep, far too wide-ranging to be totally covered in these humble lines. Yet by the same token, by selecting certain segments, one can visualize what could be called a great event. And by the same token, when the fair hits its centennial 150th year in 2006, surely there will be more true stories, more programs, more excitement, and more of the ongoing anticipation of Fair Week that has long since become part and parcel of local life. The beginning. Other counties in the area were doing it, and many others were planning, and it was the latter planning category that Darke County spawned its first agricultural exposition in the late summer of 1852, when better than a score of people gathered in the second edition courthouse in Greenville to say in no uncertain terms, "We want a fair of our own." Dr. Ian Gard was named Chief Executive Officer and ably led such men as George Cover, Alfred Kitchen, Noah Arnold to realize that dream. And so it came to pass on Wednesday and Thursday, September 7th and 8th of 1853, Darke indeed had a fair of its own. Greenville as the county seat was selected for geographic reasons, and the initial fair was held on the Annie Oakley Festival grounds immediately east of the Garst Museum. The Agricultural Society expanded to 300 members, and in 1858 they moved the fair to today's Oakwood and Oak Streets in the southwest Greenville adjacent to the Brethren's home, where one can still see the partial outline of the harness racing track in the street curvature. Then 1870. The 16th fair moved, the third and final grounds move was made, and it was established not as large or as busy as today, but moved nonetheless to today's location. It's remarkable that only 3 times since its inception has there been no fair held, and this article will discuss it later. The fair rapidly established itself as not only the ways and means to exhibit livestock and crop bounties, but a much-needed respite to troubles and cares, beneficial rest stop along the highways of life. And my wife and I, Tara and I, talked about this. Fairs have been going on, gatherings have been going on since people began to gather. People want an excuse, and if you remember in the days before television and radio, the only time you got to socialize was on Sunday morning, and usually either Friday night or Saturday when you went to town and bought all of your necessities once a week. The kids all piled in the wagon, and maybe they would get a 1 cent, 1 penny candy treat at the hardware store or the dry goods store. It's a time of socializing, and it still is. People still come to the fair to eat things they probably shouldn't eat, and to eat more of those things that they shouldn't eat, to buy things they don't need, and to look at strange things that they've never seen before except for the last year of the fair. Okay. In 1870, today's fairgrounds was established. In the decades of the Darke County Fair, the United States has been involved in no less than 7 wars. 642,000 men and women lost their lives, a number of those from Darke County. We went through the Roaring 20s, the Great Depression, but the fair always had its unique pressure release valve, and so shall it always be. She is going to talk about the fairs of 100, 75, 50, and 25 years ago. And we begin the journey in 1898. The 43rd fair now moved back from its September song of earliest days to the familiar August run. At that time, it was a 5-day event, Monday through Friday, the 22nd through the 26th. By the time the whole shebang was in the books, It was estimated by the Fair Board that 25,000 people had been in attendance. The highlight was, hearken to the Wizard of Oz, famous Professor Cannon and his miraculous balloon ascension and the breath-stopping parachute leaps to the huge gray grandstand. This was in, what did I say, 1878? 1898. The famous professor went up in a balloon, a hot air balloon, just like you saw in The Wizard of Oz, only he didn't, in The Wizard of Oz, the professor didn't jump out of the balloon with a parachute on and parachute down to the ground. That must have been something pretty astounding for the people of Darke County to see. People drove their horse-drawn buggies and wagons right onto the grounds and made a full day of it, bringing bulging baskets of chicken fried in iron skillets, covered with grandmother's red and white checkered cloth, crockery containers of true lemonade, a veritable Alps of homemade potato salad, acres of homemade apple and cherry pies, and all the trimmings. People vied for space under the sheltering giant oaks, laid out their tablecloths and shooed away whack ants. Things have not changed. Children hooted and cavorted, adults visited, compared life notes, discussed the fall harvest. By the time the sun sank over the prairie land to the west, it was homeward bound, there to reach by dark. Premiums for exhibits were very modest by today's rates, 50 cents for a glove case or a fancy whisk broom in the ornamental work category. Harness racing had then a hefty total purse of $2,200, and a single admission to the grounds was $0.25, and the family ducats at $1. Family ducats is a term you don't run across much in modern literature. Downtown Greenville, where everyone did their Friday, Saturday trading, was itself a bustling spot, fortified by the Mozart store, operated by Eikenberry and Christopher, where it seemed everybody had worked at one time or another. Limbered in Hands Dry Goods at 3rd and Broadway, Emmerich's drugstore, where you could purchase a gallon of machine oil for 25 cents, or a bottle of Scott's emulsifier if you were experiencing tiredness but didn't need the oil. Any of those names ring a bell? I'm not from around here, so that's way before me. But I'm betting it's way before most of any of us too. Except Eikenberry rings a bell. I'm sure that's probably the same family. In a long, tired and found true history of Darke County, there never has been, nor likely ever will be, an entity that has drawn more abiding attention of so many untold thousands of people, residents and non-residents alike, as that August augmentation fair week. 75 years ago, the 1923 edition, the fair's 68, held even higher promise for things to do, things to see, and things to hear about. August 20th to 24th, it added some new wrinkles as 3 stake races, boys livestock judging contest, girls canning club work, and something called, curiously, the Ohio 10 Litter Club. Any idea what the Ohio 10 Litter Club would be about? Litters of puppies? I have no idea. So, and the person writing this article didn't know either. Interestingly enough, you had the boys livestock judging and the girls canning club. Things have changed since 1923. The Arcanum High School Band performed, as did the Greenville American Legion Post Musicians. The Civic League operated a first aid tent on Soldiers' Day, that's now Veterans Day. And the current and former people in uniform marched in parade from the Memorial Hall to the fairgrounds. Business leader Tom Billingsley entered one of his steeds named Glendale in the speed program, while SF Ludi went with his horse, a filly, we think, named Ruth Axworthy. Frida Rissmiller captured blue ribbons and a free trip to Columbus for her canning exhibit. Go to the big city, a free trip to Columbus. How impressive was that in 1923? And you took the train, you didn't drive your car. Ohio's Warren G. Harding was president as the fair plans gelled, but he was to die in San Francisco that August 2nd under some still feel worse mysterious circumstances. But all in all, it was another endless scheme of ever successful fairs, and Darke County looked to the turning of leaves and the opening of another school term. 1948. A great deal had happened in the country by the time the 93rd fair rolled around in August of 1948, not the least of which was that breathing space between World War II and the Korean conflict. This was a great year because no fair would be held in 49. Premiums for exhibitors amounted to $30,000, and the Fair Board Secretary said included was $14,000 for the speed program, that's the harness racing run over 5-day run. Ohio Governor Thomas J. Herbert was in attendance along with his wife. Although he didn't speak, he enjoyed, parenthesis, one could hopefully assume, end parenthesis. There was $2,000 in junior fair premiums, and Wednesday and Thursday horse team pulling contests grew in popularity. In those days, when everybody had horses, the horse pulling contest went for 2 days, not 2 hours. Well, it was about 3 hours last night. There were 5 teams competing, some from Ohio and some from Indiana. I've been there most years, and it's mostly the same teams. These horses are giants. They are huge. They'd make my horse would have to be 3 of my horse to fit into one of those horses. For grandstand entertainment, then getting a solid foothold, the Fair Board had acquired the services of the Duke of Paducah and Bradley Kincaid. Never heard of it. Popular radio entertainers in the country western category. Lucky Lotto brought his auto thrill show, and a 3-ring circus that called itself Sawdust and Spangles was also on hand. Add to that the Cleveland Marching Majorettes, who performed in some of their Cleveland Browns football games routines. So the cheerleaders now came to county fairs to perform, which is, now they perform on TV, but it's pretty much the same thing. As always, especially in those days, Greenville and the county communities went dark during Fair Week. Businesses and offices closed up tightly, and all simply went to the fair. Some still do. Election day saw 5 Fair Board members retain their offices. Art Bargy was one, Dewey Haynes, Charlie York, Jess Ross, and Urban Bankson. Bargy name is still around here that I'm aware of, maybe the others too. Gate receipts for one day for Friday amounted to $7,500, and the total week's income was $70,000. This is in 1948. 1973, the 117th running huge expressly when mirrored with the 175th and 50th. It was 8 nights with a load of icing on a colorful cake that included the famed H.M. Partial Memorial Futurities harness racing for pacers and trotters. Fair Board Chief Frank Stebbins was joined in the office by his right-hand man, and their venerable Dean Martin served as secretary. International Circus before the big grandstand on Sunday afternoon and evening, a demolition derby Friday evening, and the all-county worship service, tons of harness racing, the big livestock and equipment parade, 4-H activities, all have grown in popularity since 1948. Uncle Jack and Aunt Kay were very popular with the young and not so young along the Midway as they twisted balloons into all manner of animal shapes, told jokes and patted hundreds of little heads, rang their Swiss bells and tolled their clanking cowbells. The former vaudevillians were to move around to be around for many Darke County fairs. When vaudeville closes up, you move to the county fair, the next step up or down as it may be. The missing fairs, 3 times since 1853, no event. 3 and only 3. 1862 and 63, the fair was canceled because the county was embroiled in pitting brother against brother in the Civil War. The Ohio Volunteer Infantry had taken so many to Shiloh and Bull Run, Vicksburg, and Gettysburg that frankly there wasn't enough manpower to either operate or attend the county fair. And that was that. Patriotism also prevailed, and Board Chief William Garner announced no fairs. Then for 84 consecutive years, the great Darke County Fair held forth until 1949. The disease was called by 3 names: poliomyelitis, infantile paralysis, and polio. At first, medical science and a modicum of popular belief felt that polio, a disease that feasted mainly on the young, causing paralysis and sometimes death, was borne by houseflies. Communities, including those in Darke County, liberally sprayed DDT, which is definitely a no-no now, because not only did it kill all the insects, the beneficial and the harmful, it also stayed in the environment and went down into the bones, eggs, and food chain of birds. As we know, the American eagle almost became extinct, the bald eagle, because their eggs would crack when they laid on them because of the DDT, weakened the strength of the eggs. And when DDT was canceled, thanks to Rachel, whatever her name was, Carson, yeah. The American eagle has made a comeback, and now you can see American eagles actually around here in Richmond at the reservoir. There are eagles. I've not been lucky enough to see one yet, but I've talked to a lot of people who have. I've seen pictures of local eagles. By 1949, the county of Darke closed its swimming pools, shuttered its meetings. City and county health departments issued dire and truthful warnings, and people in 1949 listened to what the health department said. What has changed? City Health Chief Maurice Kane met with the fair board, who left it in his hands whether to hold a fair. It was not. So many local families were affected by polio, either at home or through a friend, neighbor, or church fellow. Every week, the terrible summer of '49, there were more and more reported local cases. The Jim Light family is a prime example. First 9-year-old son Bobby contracted the dreaded disease, then his 6-year-old brother Johnny. By August 1st, Darke had recorded 21 cases. In 17 days prior to the fair's announced opening, he wisely turned thumbs down. By then, there were some 22 county polio cases. A feeling of dread spread throughout the county, the Miami Valley, the state, and the nation. By the morning of August 12th, there were 28 local polio victims, and the public gathering restrictions went on, but there were daylight ahead. Officials began to ease off August 18th, first allowing church services, then as time went on, other activities, but the restrictions on those under age 19 were to remain past the crucial 2-week span. All in all, the county polio case load peaked at 33, and I don't have the population numbers. I should have looked that up for 1948, but it's minuscule compared to what it is now. So 33 out of that population was a pretty scary number. By the summer of 1950, they knew the county needed a shot in the arm, so they went full bore into reopening the fair. And the Salk vaccine came out in the early 50s. It wasn't 1950, so they were still taking the chance then. But I can remember getting the Salk vaccine. Today's younger people cannot be expected to feel the sheer terror and uneasiness felt in those late 1940s when polio so disagreeably ruled. But even now, some of its local victims remain as evidence of the terrible swath it cut. So sadly, Salk and Sabin preventatives for the disease were then too many years in the future. All right, here's some statistics that she lists. In 2008, there was a gate revenue of $377,800. In 2010, they replaced the grandstand that was built in 1910 for $15,000. And the domestic arts building was built. This was before was the sheep barn or the cattle barn. One of the barns burned down.
Cattle barn.
Cattle barn burned down, was rebuilt, and much improved there. The gate revenue continued to be exceeded at one time after another. The new record was $391,000 in 2011. It was $537,000. And livestock sales, this is for the 4-H kids, totaled $406,000. Let's see, the new sheep barn had a concrete floor in 2013 for $56,000. So they go through a bunch of numbers here. The last one they had was 2013, $419,675 was the gate receipts. The auction lots for the livestock was $406,000. So that's pretty incredible, and they go through a bunch of track times for the harness racing. Great Darke County Fair has been a history here for over 150 years. It is an integral part of the community, and I've never spent much time before there. There are a lot of people there, and from sitting in the tent just watching people walk by, I was most impressed by gaits. Some people lean forward when they walk, which is pretty amazing. Some people actually lean backwards when they walk. A lot of people have arthritis and hobble instead of walk. And some people, younger people, just kind of skip along in an enviable looseness of limb that I wish I could remember even how that went. And there is an incredible number of little electric scooters out there now, and those people don't seem to mind here blowing their horns and speeding through the midway. That's actually, I'm surprised there haven't been more problems than there have been. So, any comments on the Great Darke County Fair?
Madison Sausage Barn has been there about 48 years selling sausage sandwiches.
Yes, and I had a sausage and egg sandwich. They had it ready in like 2 seconds, a lot quicker than most places.
This was my 29th year with the sausage barn for the fair.
And that was by the grandstand, so I think it's the same place it always is, isn't it? And I told you about the price increases were killing me. $12 for a tenderloin sandwich, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous.
I heard that same sandwich sold for 13 at the Mercer County Fair.
13?
Yeah.
Well, actually, did anybody eat at the Hollinsburg chicken barbecue thing?
I did.
You did? Well, I went by Monday and Tuesday, and I'm sure the price on the board said like $7.50, and I thought, well, that's a heck of a deal. I'm going there.
13.
Yeah, and when I went back Thursday to get one, it was $13.
Yeah.
And the only good thing I can say about it was you get your choice of 2 sides, beans and applesauce or whatever you want, or an ear of corn. They actually gave you a big ladle, you know, like when you go to the fire department, you get a little tiny cup with like 2 spoonfuls in it. They gave you a big ladle that actually made a meal in itself. The barbecue chicken was not what I would call
Mine wasn't quite good.
mine was done, but it was overdone because it was really dry. And I like barbecue chicken, but my mouth was hungry for that moist kind of big bite, and it was kind of a dry bite. So it's kind of like what I ended up doing at home, so that wasn't improvement. Okay.
You can get the beef tips dinner down there at the end of the West Coliseum, or West Midway for $14.
Beef tip dinner, was that in sides and everything?
Yeah.
I'm just not used to spending that kind of money for a meal
Prices were
unless I can
so
sit
well.
down and have some waitress bring me a drink and refill everything for free. So,
Did you say $18?
14. $14. Yeah.
Kenny, question, do you think parks will ever have enough people to maintain?
Say that again?
Do you think in the future that because parks will have enough people to maintain the trailers?
Well, we don't have enough to fill the work schedule as it is right now. We got to depend largely on the community, and we get very good response from the community. We fill 165 work slots, 4-hour shifts on that sort of social hour.
Yeah.
Running from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, something like that. 165 shifts.
that's,
How many normal people do you have assigned that's on Washington right now?
Normal people?
Normal people? Do you have numbers?
Say that again.
How many members do you want?
I think we have around 30 members.
30?
Yeah. But in addition to that, some of us are getting to the age that we don't want to be in the barn anymore, and some have health issues, can't be in the barn anymore. So
yeah.
again, we got to rely on outside help to pull through the fair. We get very good response. We use the motto, help us, help you. We contact those that we help financially. Help us in the barn, we'll help you in your projects.
That's a good idea. Help is getting hard to find everywhere. One of the guys I work with, his parents have a elephant ear trailer. He works in the elephant ear trailer instead of working for us repairing houses because they can't get enough help to do. And they gave me an elephant ear just because I know everybody. I'm not much of a fan of elephant ear. That's just fried bread with sugar on it. Even if it's only $5, it still is a waste of $5 as far as I'm concerned. If you had to give it to me, I wouldn't. So, all right.
Tim, that was so good.
Yeah.
What's that?
Her presentation was so good.
It's, what makes a presentation good is when everybody's entered the topic.
They
So,
were.
yes, and I'm sure we have a captive audience here who is
Speaking of the polio, there was one case here in the New Madison area. Glenna Eubanks, outside of town, had polio, and she ended up, she was still able to walk, but with crutches and such. And she has passed away now. She was a couple of years older than me, and later in life she developed diabetes and other things involved. But she walked on crutches all the way through high school.
That was a tremendously sad, debilitating feat, not just the people in iron lungs, like you say, the people who are left who are crippled and walk with cane or crutches, and many other accompanying health problems, and that stayed with them their entire life until they died. Vaccines, people, is just, I mean, I don't understand that's what I'm saying, we're going backwards here somehow. We're losing our grip on science, and I'm not sure unless my virus theory that some kind of virus is infecting the human race, like a lemming jumping off a cliff.
You mentioned polio vaccine. That didn't come out until the early 60s, didn't it?
No, it was in the 50s because I got it when I was a kid.
My kids, I remember the age of my kids.
Well, I can remember
Because it started out, he had Salk and Sabin, and Salk, I think, was the one that came out with the injected, was a needle injection, and then they came out with the oral polio. And that was,
the tube of sugar.
yeah.
That's the one that we took down here in the early 60s.
Yeah, that was the advantage when they didn't have to stick kids with needles anymore. And the same thing, I mean, I had measles, I had chicken pox, I had all those childhood diseases, and you think, and people say that, I had all those diseases, nothing happened to me. Well, chicken pox, rubella, rheumatic fever, those can kill people. Even chicken pox can kill certain people. So why expose your kids to that? And the new thing now is the HPVC or H. It's a vaccine that you can give particularly your daughters, but your sons as well, to prevent them from getting that, which causes cervical cancer. There's no reason in the world not to protect your kids when they're young for something that may not happen, but if it does, it's devastating. Okay, our offering is as usual. We're going to hear people will say we're in love, and we are in love with the community that we live in, the nation we live in, and the world that we live in. So feel free to contribute, or if you need something, to take something out. 66, when the summer sun is shining, which it is today, but mercifully not so hot at the beginning of the day. Extinguishing the Chalice is an interfaith benediction by Gary Kowalski. This comes from the Unitarian Universalist website, and Gary is a frequent contributor and has some pretty good stuff. Gathered in our various faiths, we give thanks for the blessings of the world community as we share our common dream, homes and schools where children thrive, neighborhoods that are safe and clean, a city rich in colors and cultures, an economy where no one is expendable, a beloved community where rich and poor alike have access to the opportunity for a dignified and productive life, churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples where our deepest hope is to be of service to a hurting world. Enable us as we leave this place to carry forth this prayer into the coming week, turning our thoughts toward charity, our hearts toward justice, and our hands toward the work of peace. Shalom and amen. Postlude, if ever I would leave you. All right, that ends our service. First Universalist of New Madison. Coffee cake right out of the freezer from Kroger's is there, and lemonade and coffee if anybody wants. Wear your masks when you're out in public. I did not wear a mask walking down the Midway because there was like lots of space and lots of air moving. But here at the grocery store or Walmart or any place else where it's closed,
Yes, I'd like to.
the virus is still there.
Could I catch everybody's attention while they're sitting here, maybe?
Yes.
Yes, please, okay.
Attention, please. We're going to do a little discussion on Ukraine service.
Yeah, it's just 5 minutes, okay. As you know, the Ukrainian people are still getting bombed and people are hurting. So what we thought we would do is to gather supplies such as medical supplies, non-perishable food, winter's coming clothing, and so on and so forth. There is a church in Callaway, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, and they actually ship things. If you look on their website, they have some pictures of what they have. It's a Slavic church. It's called Grace Evangelical Church. And I have not contacted them yet because what I need is to know what the communities around here are capable of giving or doing. And I have talked to the mayor of New Madison, a very delightful lady. Her name is Monica, I won't pronounce her last name, Schlechte. And she said she would contact me. She said, is it okay if I contact other churches? I said, absolutely. And that was 2 weeks ago. I know she's pretty busy. The other person in Greenville is Steve Willman, and I was referred to the what is it called? The Main Street Greenville, and which I guess is a group of business people who get together and plan things, fairs and so on and so forth. I got to talk to their secretary. I called twice to see if I can bug them. The guy that's head of that is Great Buildings. Suppose they're going to get back to me sometime. I guess I'm getting a little anxious. If this church in the church at El Dorado had 100 people, we used to go to church in Cincinnati. We had over 100 people that show up every Sunday. I would just go and say, look, call this Ukrainian society. There's two societies. One's for culture. I've called these Ukrainian societies. This is what we need. And I'll put a list up. Sign the list. You can give clothing, you can give furniture, you can give non-perishable foods. Here's the list. We don't have it. So I'm relying on maybe finding other groups, such as Main Street Greenville. I was given a name. I called Jim Morehouse, and he was a little bit hesitant. I did get to talk to him. Henry referred me to Doug Cleanson. Well, I'm probably pronouncing his name. Let me give it a better shot. Doug Cleanson. And it has something to do with the surrounding churches. They meet. I'm not familiar with it.
There's an ecumenical church meeting. I can put you in touch with those people.
That'd be great. Yeah. So what I need is an audience, or we need an audience, so that we need an audience with leaders of groups, such as a minister or this person who knows Main Street Greenville. Monica seems like she's really on board. Like I said, really delightful lady. She was immediately saying, well, me see if I can contact so-and-so, and so-and-so. I say, absolutely. It seems like it's going a little bit slow here, but the problem is coming is that my wife and I won't be here for over 3 weeks. We're going to be in California watching our grandkids. Pray for us. We did this. Hey, we did this, but we were much young, about half our age when we did this, and our daughter will be in Turkey, and our son-in-law will be in Ireland. So, and that'll be 3 weeks, and then possibly even later in November too.
When is the 3 weeks? When are you beginning and ending?
September 10th to October 4th.
3 weeks later.
Yeah, okay, October 4th, yeah. And, but, I have an iPhone. I have a new iPhone, in fact, so, I can do phone calls and so on. So it's a 3-hour difference here. But if you all are willing to maybe find a group that we could talk to, a meeting with the town council, a meeting of a large church, a meeting of a group of ministers who get together. If you can key me into that, I'd be more than happy to talk. I know you volunteered, it's just, it's just like there's a group of people and they say, if you watch the Three Stooges, I need a volunteer, and everybody steps back except for one person. I don't, hopefully that wasn't the case. So, okay, I'm just kind of throwing this out to everybody. If you have a better direction, if you have some leads for a larger group of people, please let me know. My email is real easy. It's lourebro, LOUREBRO @yahoo.com. If you want, I think you can get that on so let me know. If you have, hey, Lou, why don't you try this? I'm all ears. So, again, I will, when I know I have a group of people, a large group of people, I will contact this church, Grace. It's a Slavic church in Callaway, Ohio, Grace Evangelical Church. I will contact and say, what do you need? I know this is what we can give. We always need money. Lloyd, probably the guy that handled that if you could. And you're an expert at that. And I can't even read all your stuff, and it's just too complicated for me to read. But so that's it. If you have any suggestions, if you know of anybody of any group that you would like to talk to, I will talk to them. Just please let me know.
Lou, I think if we approach different groups, as you're going, if they're not coming up with any ideas, then if we could come up with something that would help, then just basically, as we reach them, what is it that we want to do in terms of, as you mentioned, raise money, or do we want to provide material support, or something else, right? And if we could decide that, then as we approach each of those, because I'm not so sure as you approach each of these groups, they're not going to come up with something necessarily, right? So I just thought, just this morning, as you mentioned, talking about the Main Street Greenville group, I'm not totally familiar with it, but they have a first Friday, I think, right, Roberta? I think
Yes.
they do. And so I don't even know whether they would want to take up on that first Friday placard sign or something, taking up a collection. That's just an idea. But if you did that, and if we decide on that, then they would be a piece. The council of churches, which I'm surprised because I thought Jim Morehouse, he's part of it. Bell ringing, which we've all been involved with in Christmas time. That council of churches, as Tim mentioned, and as you already mentioned also, Lou, that would be a piece that they could play because they could say, on this Sunday in November, it's Ukraine Day. Whether it's the Lutheran Church in Bradford or whether it's the Holy English Church in Hollinsburg, I'm strictly making this up. They would basically collect $10 or $75. If that coincided with First Friday, our project would be our transparent accounting. Here's what we collected, and here's the proof that we donated it to Grace Evangelical, or we donated it to a Ukraine relief organized out of New York City or Europe. But I'm thinking your laying the groundwork here would be great because you're making contacts. So if we decide as a group, first time it's money, and we do this, this, and this,
we've got these contacts and all this groundwork in play. And then as you go forward, and others maybe do helping you contact different groups, then we're going to say to them, hey, on November 21st or November 15th, countywide, we're going. Then we can lay the groundwork in September, late September, early October. Watch out because countywide there's going to be a Ukrainian relief, and these organizations and groups are involved. First Friday, Main Street Regional Fund.
I think that's the route ahead, is set a money project and set a date and, make plans.
Yeah, we need to be specific. I mean, if I go in the group and say, gee, this is, we could share it, we could use this, we need to be specific for the group. I do know that, but I need we need the audience first. And, I don't know what the pulse of this area is. I mean, all of you have lived here longer than I have, and if it's, start with this first Friday. If I can get a hold of this guy, great buildings, maybe, I don't know, does anybody know?
I think it's a spin-off from Chamber of Commerce, and I think it's maybe grant funded. So I think it's loosely related to Darke County Visitors Bureau, but also it's more economic based on economic Darke County, particularly Greenville, first Fridays and so on.
Well, see, yeah, I mean, maybe we can start out with just donations because people were, to start with,
And everybody having a piece of it. If they want to, everybody having a piece that on this Sunday before November 21st or whatever, we're collecting for the Darke County, Ukrainian relief or fundraiser.
If any of you have a name or something, again, yes, that sounds like a good idea. And if they still have their first Friday, I know that St. Mary's does where we live, but they ended it.
Well, they might shy away. They might say, well, this is really to promote merchants, and we don't, even though this isn't political, it's political life. Then we go, but we also, you have it already beginnings of collecting through the council churches. So then we go to them and say, this is what we want to do, and would you be willing to support this in your church with this little poster, with these announcements, so that by this date, or on this date, Sunday, everybody in Darke County is collecting for Ukraine. And this is what it's going to go to. It's transparent, no hidden fees, no money taken out. We will. Just an idea for a starter. And if it really takes root in future years, it could, or hopefully not, the war's not going on that long, but future years is material support maybe.
Let me get a hold of this Darke Cleansing. I don't have his phone number, but I do have his.
So the council?
Yeah, and then I want to get a hold of this also this guy Ray.
Yeah.
But I think that would be good. Maybe to start off with a donation, financial donations. Also, I would like to eventually have maybe some folk music, and and that would just so people can maybe get a better feeling for what this culture is. It's a very rich culture. I mean, they have that game painting. If you ever see some of the things that they do, is amazing.
Just food for thought, but
I contacted a lady who was with their cultural society down here in Dayton, I believe it is, or Cincinnati, and she was kind of more enthusiastic about the sharing of culture and maybe getting donations that way. So,
well, see, the culture group, even if any of this comes about in terms of a November countywide day, the culture groups could come in on that first Friday and simply be an entertainment part of First Friday with promoting for handouts on this date. Please join us in. Food for thought.
well, I appreciate your attention here, buddy, and if you're willing to find somebody, a group, or set up a group, again, by the way, Jared will be, he wants to get involved. He's just kind of up to his ears in writing grants right now. But I think that after this month is over, I think he has more time. So this is the start. This is the beginning. I'm still kind of
Thank you for taking the lead on it.
It's kind of nebulous in my head, and my wife has schooled me a couple of times. You need to be more specific. And I go, okay. And can I come back in the house now? And no, that's not right. But I don't know what audience I have yet. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, we're starting here and countywide, basically.
Well, whenever I talk, I always say on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Church in El Dorado and New Madison. So you guys can.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is great.
I put up one last slide. If anybody saw the last slide, and who knows what this is? Sperm whales. Nobody ever knew sperm whales sleep in a vertical position. They inhale a giant breath of air and they sink to the bottom and they float heads up for 2 or 3 hours. Is how they sleep, holding their breath for 2 or 3 hours. No one knew that until this photographer discovered this just recently. So that's pretty impressive. All right.